When you imagine a killer, what picture appears in your head? Is it a man holding a gun? Or maybe a knife? The crimes these people commit are often loud, explosive, and physically messy. But there is another kind of killer, a far quieter and more organized one. This killer doesn't use weapons like bullets or blades, but paper and spreadsheets. This is the story of a man who calculated murder in the neat columns of profit and loss, turning the deepest human suffering into just another number on a page. This is the story of that man. He never once operated a gas chamber himself. He never stood over a ditch and fired a single shot. Instead, he sat in a comfortable office behind a large, polished desk. And with the simple stroke of a pen, he helped build an industrial system of death and theft on a scale that is nearly impossible to fully comprehend. He was the highly organized banker for the SS, the man who turned stolen gold from teeth and human hair into cash that fueled the Nazi war machine. He didn't just go along with genocide, he made it a business. He transformed it into a huge, profitable, and terrifyingly efficient enterprise. But when his monstrous empire finally came crashing down, the only calculation left to be made was the exact hour of his own painful death. This is the true story of Oswald Pohl, the man who balanced the books for the Holocaust. His entire empire was built on the ashes and bones of human beings. From a desk in an office in Berlin, SS Obergruppenführer Oswald Pohl managed a massive network of 20 main concentration camps and 165 smaller labor camps. It was a giant industrial machine where the raw materials were people and the final products were weapons, stone for giant buildings, and most disturbingly, gold bars that were melted down from the dental fillings of the dead. He created a system where the value of a prisoner's life was measured only by their ability to work, a cold and heartless math problem that almost always ended in death. He wasn't just another man in a uniform. He was the chief financial officer of genocide. He was the man who proved that the greatest evils in history are not just caused by hatred. They are also driven by cold, calculated, and monstrous greed. To understand the man who would become the Holocaust's top administrator, you have to look at the world that created him. Oswald Pohl was born in Duisburg, Germany, in 1892, the son of a blacksmith. He was the fifth of 8 children and grew up in a financially stable home where he did well in school. But his family's limited finances meant he had to choose a practical career path. In 1912, he joined the German Imperial Navy, which began a career that would drill into him the strict, rule-following and administrative way of thinking that would later define his terrible work. When the First World War began, he was given a role that suited him perfectly: a paymaster. He was not fighting on the front lines. He was in an office managing payrolls, tracking supplies, and organizing logistics. It was here that he first learned how to manage the machinery behind a war, a skill that he would later use with horrifying results. After the war, Germany was in a state of chaos. The nation felt humiliated by its defeat and was being torn apart by political violence. Like many other bitter veterans, Pohl found himself drawn to extremist right-wing politics. He joined the Freikorps, which were ruthless private armies that fought against communist groups, and he even participated in a failed attempt to overthrow the government. These years were crucial in shaping him. They filled him with extreme nationalism and solidified his belief in order, absolute authority, and the use of brutal force. He was accepted into Germany's new navy, the Reichsmarine, but his political beliefs were already firmly set. By 1926, he had officially joined the Nazi Party. He would later boast, "I was a National Socialist before National Socialism came into being." Pohl was very ambitious, but his rise to power wasn't quick or flashy. It was slow, steady, and carefully calculated, built on his growing reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. His true calling, however, was with the SS. In 1933, a meeting changed the course of his life forever. His own commanding officer recommended him to Heinrich Himmler, the powerful leader of the SS. Himmler was searching for a very specific kind of person, a professional administrator who could bring order to the SS's quickly growing and chaotic finances. He saw Pohl, the disciplined and experienced naval paymaster, as the perfect man for the job. Himmler personally met with him and tried to recruit him, but Pohl was hesitant to leave the security of his Navy career. But Himmler was persistent. He wrote Pohl letter after letter, explaining the challenges he would face and the immense power that would be his if he accepted. In early 1934, Pohl finally gave in, promising Himmler his total and unwavering loyalty. He was made the chief of the administration department on Himmler's personal staff. From that moment on, his power and influence grew enormously. He proved to be a master organizer, a man who deeply understood budgets, supply chains, and how to wield power. By 1938, he had gained financial control over the concentration camps, which put him in direct conflict with Theodor Eicke, the brutal inspector of the camps. It was a fierce power struggle. Eicke saw the camps only as places of punishment and terror, but Pohl was starting to see them as something more, as huge economic businesses. By 1939, Pohl's power was officially solidified. He became the chief of two major SS offices, putting him in control of the entire economic and administrative foundation of the organization. The careful naval officer had finally found his ultimate purpose, to build a massive economic empire for the SS, an empire whose foundations would be built on the backs of slave labor and unimaginable human misery. When World War II began in 1939, it created a massive and never-ending demand for war materials, weapons, and money. And Oswald Pohl, with his sharp administrative mind and total lack of a moral compass, saw a golden opportunity. He looked at the concentration camps, which were overflowing with political prisoners, Jewish people, and others the Nazis called undesirables, and he saw a giant, untouched resource of free labor. In the beginning, the administration of the camps was split between different offices, which created inefficiency and arguments. Pohl wanted total and absolute control. He didn't see prisoners as human beings. He saw them as economic assets, like tools in a factory, to be used to create the most profit possible. His ultimate goal was to create an SS economy that could support itself, funded entirely by the money made from slave labor. To achieve this, he oversaw the creation of companies that were owned and operated by the SS. The largest and most infamous of these was DEST, which stood for German Earth and Stone Works. Its main purpose was to quarry stone and produce bricks for Adolf Hitler's gigantic and monumental building projects. Camps like Mauthausen and Flossenburg weren't built in random locations. They were intentionally placed right next to massive stone quarries. Prisoners were forced to carry huge blocks of granite up the terrifying stairs of death at Mauthausen until they physically collapsed and died from pure exhaustion. Another one of these SS companies, the German Equipment Works, used prisoners to manufacture all kinds of goods, from office furniture to weapons. These were not normal businesses. They were direct extensions of the SS, created to serve both its financial needs and its hateful ideology. As Pohl himself wrote, the goal was not just to make a profit, but to accomplish things a private businessman would never attempt, even if it meant losing money on some projects that could be covered by other, more brutal operations. The real turning point happened in early 1942. The war on the Eastern Front was draining Germany's resources dry. The day before the infamous Wannsee Conference, where the final solution was officially planned, Himmler made a huge decision. He ordered the merger of all of Pohl's offices with the Inspectorate of Concentration Camps, creating one massive super agency, the SS Main Economic and Administrative Office, or the WVHA. And Oswald Pohl was put in charge of the entire thing. This move was a massive victory for Pohl. He now had complete and total control over every single part of the camp system. He decided everything, from which prisoners were assigned to which work details to how their deaths were administered. The WVHA was a giant, sprawling bureaucracy of terror, and its structure gave Pohl control over almost everything. He ran the administration for the entire Waffen-SS, the 20 main concentration camps, the 165 satellite camps, and every single one of the SS economic businesses. After Himmler himself and Reinhard Heydrich, he was arguably the third most powerful man in the entire SS. With this new immense power, he did not waste a single moment. In a now infamous memo dated April 30th, 1942, he laid out his chilling new vision. The camp commanders, he ordered, must ensure that the work must be exhausting in the true sense of the word in order to achieve maximum performance. And then came the most horrifying instruction of all. There are no limits to working hours. This was the official birth of a formal policy: extermination through labor. It was a twisted combination of economics and ideology. The enemies of the Nazi state would be literally worked to death, and in doing so, they would provide the fuel for the German war machine. Pohl and the WVHA then began to lease prisoners to private German companies. Corporations like IG Farben, Siemens and Daimler-Benz paid the SS a fee for each prisoner per day. These major pillars of the German economy became willing partners in Pohl's horrific system, making huge profits directly from the brutal exploitation of human beings. The man who had started his career as a quiet naval paymaster was now the chief architect of an industrial empire built on slavery and mass murder. He had successfully combined the cold, heartless logic of bureaucracy with the raw, violent brutality of the concentration camps. He had created a perfectly rationalized, financially driven system for committing genocide. With the massive WVHA under his complete command, Oswald Pohl officially turned mass murder into a formal business. It was a disgusting and horrifyingly efficient business model where every single part of a human body and every stolen personal item was systematically assigned a monetary value. The policy of extermination through labor was the foundation of this entire system. Prisoners who were healthy enough to work were sent to quarries and factories where they were forced to work for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, on rations that were barely enough to keep them alive. The system was intentionally designed for a high turnover of people. In late 1942, Pohl actually sent a memo complaining that the recent deaths of over 70,000 new prisoners were hurting productivity at nearby armaments factories. His concern was not for the human lives that had been lost, but for the temporary interruption in factory output. The logic behind this was terrifyingly simple. The SS profited from the labor of each prisoner. Once a prisoner became too sick or weak to continue working, they were no longer an asset. They became a liability. At that point, they were often murdered, usually by gassing, to make room for a new, healthier worker who could take their place. It was a non-stop conveyor belt of death, a system paid for by some of Germany's most famous corporations. But the exploitation did not end with their death. Pohl designed and masterminded a system for the complete plundering of his victims, a process that began the very moment they stepped off the trains at the camps. At camps like Auschwitz, new arrivals were forced to hand over everything they owned: money, watches, jewelry, and wedding rings. All of it was collected and sent straight into the SS's bank accounts. But the process became even more ghoulish. Pohl issued direct orders that after prisoners were murdered in the gas chambers, their bodies were to be plundered for anything of value. Special prisoner groups, known as the Sonderkommando, were forced to perform the horrifying task of pulling gold teeth and fillings from the mouths of the dead. Women's hair was cut off and sold to German companies to be made into products like felt or industrial insulation. Even their eyeglasses and clothes were collected, sorted, and shipped back to Germany. Absolutely nothing was wasted. All of this stolen wealth was funneled back to the German National Bank, the Reichsbank, where it was deposited into secret accounts controlled by the SS. To hide the gruesome origin of these assets, the SS created a fake identity for the bank accounts: Max Heiliger. It was a truly sick and cruel joke, as the name Heiliger means saint in German. Under this fake name, countless gold fillings and wedding rings were melted down into untraceable gold bars. The profits of mass murder were being laundered with the full knowledge and cooperation of Germany's central bank. Pohl was the man who oversaw this entire monstrous operation. He was an innovator in the business of genocide, constantly pushing his subordinates to find new ways to increase efficiency. And while millions of people were suffering and dying in his camps, was Pohl living a simple life? Not at all. He and his family moved into a luxurious villa in Berlin that had been stolen from a Jewish family. The home's original owner, a woman named Fanny Tolman, was later deported to the Ravensbrück concentration camp and murdered. Pohl even used slave labor from the camps to renovate his new home and other country estates. He lived a life of extreme luxury, all of it financed by the suffering and death of millions. It was a perfectly closed loop of exploitation. People were enslaved, worked to death, murdered, and then plundered for anything of value. That value was then turned into cash to help fund the war and enrich men like Pohl. And at the very center of it all was Oswald Pohl, the banker of the Holocaust, carefully counting the profits as the crematoria burned day and night. By the start of 1945, Oswald Pohl's massive empire of death was finally crumbling, along with the rest of the Third Reich. Allied armies were pushing into Germany from all sides, liberating the concentration camps and exposing the full horror of his work to the rest of the world. The stone quarries fell silent, the slave labor factories were destroyed, and the man who had managed it all was now a fugitive on the run. When the war officially ended, Pohl went underground. He knew he was a high-profile wanted man. His name was near the very top of the Allied lists of war criminals. So, the once powerful SS Obergruppenführer simply vanished. He adopted a new identity, Ludwig Gneiss, a humble farmhand. He found a place to hide in a small, remote village, working as a common laborer and hoping he could just disappear into the chaos of post-war Germany. But British investigators were systematically closing in. In January 1946, they managed to capture his former adjutant, who, under interrogation, gave them crucial information that led them closer to Pohl. By May, they had tracked the man known as Ludwig Gneiss to a farm near the city of Bremen. On May 27, 1946, a team of British soldiers moved in to make the arrest. The man who once held the absolute power of life and death over millions of people was discovered dressed in simple farm clothes, completely disguised. The arrest was not a calm one. Knowing what was in store for him, Pohl panicked. A British corporal had to physically grab his arms to stop him from reaching for cyanide capsules he had hidden inside old rifle cartridges. He had a plan to cheat the hangman, but the soldiers were faster. At first, he continued to lie, denying who he really was. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. It wasn't long before the BBC was broadcasting the news of his capture across Europe. The quiet farmhand Ludwig Gneiss was gone, and Oswald Pohl, the banker of the concentration camps, was now a prisoner in Allied custody. He was transferred to Nuremberg to await trial. The bureaucrat who had spent years calculating the economic value of human lives would now have his own life weighed on the scales of justice. His downfall was complete. The administrator of death was now just another prisoner, stripped of his power, his uniform, and all of his lies, waiting for his day in court. Inside the large wood-paneled courtroom at Nuremberg, Oswald Pohl was finally forced to answer for his crimes. His trial, one of the subsequent Nuremberg trials conducted by the US military, was focused squarely on the WVHA and its operations. Sitting alongside him in the dock were 17 of his former subordinates, the accountants, managers, and administrators who had helped him run the machinery of death. The charges against them were severe: war crimes, crimes against humanity, and membership in a criminal organization. The prosecution team, led by American lawyer Telford Taylor, used the Nazis' own incredibly detailed records as the primary evidence against them. They presented a mountain of memos, financial statements, and letters that documented everything, from the system of leasing out slave labor to the organized plunder of victims' gold teeth. Prosecutor James McHaney described the men on trial as the masterminds behind the rationalization of turning corpses into money on a mass basis. The evidence was simply undeniable. There were official documents bearing Pohl's own signature, ordering that prisoners be worked to death. There were detailed financial records that traced the path of stolen gold from the mouths of murdered victims all the way to the secret Max Heiliger bank accounts. Pohl's defense strategy was simple: deny everything. "I was just a bureaucrat," he repeatedly claimed. He argued that he was just a small cog in a machine so enormous that he couldn't possibly be held responsible for what happened. He insisted that he knew nothing about the extermination program and that his focus was purely on economics and administration. In a final, unrepentant statement to the court, he declared, "I am not conscious of having committed a crime." Incredibly, he even tried to justify his anti-Semitism by quoting the American industrialist Henry Ford. Throughout the trial, he spoke of prisoners as manpower and described their deaths as an unfortunate side effect that harmed economic productivity. But under intense cross-examination, his cold and calculated facade began to crack. In a separate trial, when asked why the slave laborers he managed were so inefficient, he shot back with a flash of cynical honesty, "If I was a forced laborer, I would not do more than I would absolutely have to either." It was a shocking moment of truth from a man who had shown absolutely no empathy for years. On November 3, 1947, the final judgment was delivered. Pohl was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The tribunal ruled that his administrative role made him directly and personally responsible for the mass murder and the brutal, inhumane conditions inside the camps. The presiding judge completely dismantled his claims of being just a simple bureaucrat. The court found that the WVHA was not a business office, but a criminal instrument of human slavery and mass extermination. For his role as the chief architect of this monstrous system, Oswald Pohl was sentenced to death by hanging. The trial of the concentration camp banker was over. The final balance sheet had been tallied. For a lifetime of calculated cruelty, the price was his own life. For nearly 4 years, Oswald Pohl used every legal trick he could think of to escape his sentence. From his prison cell in Landsberg prison, the very same prison where Hitler had written Mein Kampf, he filed one appeal after another. He continued to insist that he was an innocent patriot, just a minor official who had been caught up in the great sweep of history. During this time, the man who had managed a vast economy of death claimed to have had a profound personal transformation. He began meeting regularly with a Catholic priest and even published a book titled Credo, My Way to God, which described his supposed rediscovery of his faith. To most people, however, it seemed less like a genuine conversion and more like a cynical, last-ditch effort to save his own life. His supporters sent many pleas for clemency, but the sheer weight of his crimes was simply too immense to ignore. In the dark, early morning hours of June 7, 1951, the final bill for his life of crime came due. Oswald Pohl was led from his cell to the execution chamber at Landsberg prison. He was hanged shortly after midnight. His was one of the last major executions of a Nazi war criminal carried out by the American military. The man who had reduced millions of human lives to a cold, heartless economic equation now faced the final, irreversible reality of his own death. There were no more ledgers to balance, no more assets to sell, and no more appeals left to file. The legacy of Oswald Pohl is a vital and deeply chilling one. His trial set a crucial legal standard that is still important today, that administrators and office workers in a system of genocide are just as guilty as the soldiers who pull the trigger. It proved, without a doubt, that bureaucracy itself can be used as a weapon of mass destruction. Pohl's story serves as a permanent warning against the idea of the banality of evil, the theory that horrific acts are often carried out by ordinary, unthinking bureaucrats just following orders. But Pohl was not an unthinking man. He was a creative, ambitious, and ruthless innovator who applied modern business principles to the practice of mass murder. He was, in the end, the ultimate concentration camp banker, a man whose own final, painful execution was the only fitting conclusion to a life spent profiting from human agony. Thank you for watching. The history of this dark era is filled with figures whose stories are absolutely essential to understanding the depths of human cruelty and the vital importance of seeking justice. If you found this video valuable and informative, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories of the past.